So thank you very much for, again, being aware and the conference to invite us. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciated the sessions before. It was very interesting to see. I want to, closing the H2O session in general, I want to actually pick up a topic that, as Prashant has mentioned, and then I actually I really like this. Thank you so much that you actually gave the bridge to my talk, and that's about current and future challenges of AI for business value creation. We kind of saw through your talk, Travis, that combining all the different technology elements from ETL over modeling, which is including feature engineering, the algorithms, the explainability, to deployment and monitoring, to the final, let's say, deployment in or application in for real-time decision making. We kind of, I don't want to say we solved the technology problem, but we are really close that technology is not an issue anymore in that space. So the questions are, like, if that is the case, so where are the challenges right now and in the future in order to create business value? And I really would love to, if you have questions, please just ask questions. So I actually went through and tried to figure out how many companies have shown or have seen big value in AI. And it is still a problem for a lot of companies that they don't see value creation through AI. And I'm always surprised that companies are surprised about that. When I go through that, when I went through that investigation, I actually found that it is the majority of companies that haven't seen value in AI. So, and you can go through more and more publications about it that is actually showing that AI has a return on investment problem. And but it's not that easy. It's not AI itself that has that creates the issue. It's about, or the technology of AI. It is beyond that, right? And when we when I try to, like, when I show you numbers or bullet points, it's and I have like sources to it, then it's because also from my own experience, it's something I see that a lot of executives actually say that they have or they struggle by scaling AI across the business. But most of them actually are saying that they know that in order to grow business, AI is a crucial part of it. So they need AI in order to grow business, right? And more executives say that they're scared of AI in a way that can disrupt the industry, or that if they don't jump on this AI train, they risk they're going out of business over the next years, right? And I think that there's a big gap, right? Although a lot of companies know that they need it, most of them say they haven't achieved it. And I think there's a misconception about that, and that is that the AI benefit comes instantly. It is actually a pretty long journey. Angela, could you mute yourself, please? Thank you. That it is a very long journey. McKinsey actually showed that it is the last 20% of the journey that actually creates value. So for a lot of companies right now, they don't see value. But it's the wrong expectation that the value comes instantly, right? It's not the investment in technology only that drives that value creation. It is a long journey. And why is it a long journey? Because for a lot of leaders in that space, it was a trial and error journey. So they took them many, many years to learn and build frameworks, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a mindset and an organizational perspective to build frameworks and processes that enable value creation. And I want to talk a little bit about those like big areas that go beyond technology that are actually preventing us right now from creating value. And it's not that this is necessarily something new, right? When I talk to people and mostly executives and experienced people that are in the field for many, many years, CDOs and CIOs, and I get the chance to do that in my job as senior director at H2O, I, I'm surprised that they tell me they have seen that problem 25 years ago, or they wrote their PhD thesis about that problem 25 years ago. And it was not about AI, it was about um, process optimization, or it was about operational challenges. But in total, it is about innovation. And the interesting part is that, and I like this sentence from Schopenhauer, a German philosopher 200 years ago, and it doesn't grow old. It really actually shows that we need to step a little bit back and look at the problem again, because the task is not to see what has not been seen yet, but it is to think what no one has thought about. And this, I think, describes it very well, to think about, okay, if we are with the technology piece so far that we can create value, what is it then, right? And I found in a Forbes article, it says it very, very precisely. There's an increasing awareness that the greatest problems with artificial intelligence are not primarily technical, but rather how to achieve value from that technology, right? And this is not a technology problem. It's an innovations problem, right? But not necessarily just innovations in total. It has a couple of characteristics that are unique to AI, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So I think one of those three big pieces is that the field of data science in general is a pretty new one, right? So within the last 5 years, we started having and seeing that field really coming up. And before we had like statistics and computer science, and now we call it data science. But in general, it's a really new area, right? Universities just started having MBAs and programs in that field, and we see those popping up on Coursera more and more, and other education platforms. But the problem is that in general, it's still that many executives struggle to understand how machine learning algorithms actually work, and how they can deploy AI within their organizations. And it's not a technology problem. It's about understanding processes within the organizations. How can we leverage AI? We would like to use AI, but how can we do it? Right. And we just talked about, Travis just showed the app store and the app environment. That's one way of doing it, right? But there's way more ways of implementing AI within organizational processes, but nobody really knows about those, right? There's a big gap. Another one is that although AI, ML are presently applied in many areas, right, it is still not clear how it has the potential to create value, right? And I want to give you an example. I get the chance, and I'm honored to work with a lot of leading insurance and finance companies worldwide for H2O, and the what I see is, for example, in the insurance space, that a lot of insurance companies come and say they would like to build a churn model, right? And churn model means that they would like to know who of their members is going to churn the company in a month, so who's going to quit their contracts, right? And it's very interesting that the way of thinking about it is you look at for example, in insurance space, you have $100 million in premiums, you have a 20% churn rate, so 20% of your customers churn every year. And then you think that if you build a churn model, you could stop churn. So you could save $20 million. But there's a wrong assumption about it. Even if you built that model, even if that model would be 100% correct, right? And we're something between 70, 80 maybe percent correct. But even if it would be 100% correct, and I could tell you exactly who is leaving next month, your organization, you would not be able to stop them from doing it. And it has nothing to do with AI. It has nothing to do with the technology. It's about that there's no actions to take from a business perspective. And this is, for example, in the insurance space in the US, it's highly price regulated. So you have regulated pricing. You also have usually just one product. So what happens if you call a customer and say, hey, are you happy with my company? Are you a happy customer? Everybody's going to say yes. From a psychological perspective, you don't barely get any people that actually tell you they're not happy. Plus, not everybody picks up the phone. To reach them is very, very hard too. So it's not just that it's hard to get them on the phone, also committing that they are not happy. And then what do? So you cannot offer a different pricing because you have a regulated pricing. So there's no pricing advantage. And you cannot offer a different product because you only have one product in insurance. So what do? There's nothing you can do. And at this moment, although the model is highly accurate and very, very precise on who's churning, from an analytical and technological perspective, there's no business value behind it. Or let's say very low. It is about the business actions you can take that are actually providing business value at the end. So it's a very complex system, and it requires a lot of experience to think through this whole journey from which data do you need, which algorithm to apply, which technology do you need, how do you reach those customers, and how can you change their behavior with actions that have been proven successful to actually drive business value. And that's the big problem. We currently have knowledge silos within organizations. So we have pieces that people that are specialized in technology, people that are specialized in data and engineers, but more like in storage. Then you have data scientists, right, that are specialized in the algorithmic, and the advanced analytics and so on. But the problem with that is there's a big piece missing. And that's something missing we miss at the universities as well. So we miss that in education. We miss the piece of, and that's what we have here on the right side, the business and domain and working process knowledge. How does actually the organization work? If I don't know how the organization works, then how do I improve something? I like to ask data scientists, do they know how their stakeholders work? And I usually get the answer, yes, I do. And then I ask, okay, when do they come to work? What's their first thing they do? Do they drink a coffee? What are the things they spend the most time on? Where do they get frustrated? What are the things that cost them a lot of time and effort and has a high risk for them, has low value for them, has and describe the day of a stakeholder. The interesting piece is that mostly we don't know. But how can I improve somebody's working processes and how they work if I don't know how they work? And that is something we don't get taught at university, right? That's a big knowledge gap, right? Another one is that data science projects are not software projects, right? They're not projects which can be done through waterfall planning. So because there are so many things that change over that project that are experimental, that require a different approach, that require different algorithms, that require more data, or you come to the point that it is not possible the way you you approach it, or that the outcome is different than you expected, you have to change during that project, and that requires a new way of thinking. You might think about, okay, good, that's why we have now this agile approach, being very flexible. The problem with that is that if you do that with your business stakeholders, they are really quickly thinking that you don't know what you're talking about. Because every time you talk about something new, we had to change the algorithm here, we had to do this, we had to do something here. With this agile approach in a very innovative area, it is highly difficult to work with the business side, right? Another one is, so there needs to be something in the middle. There needs to be a specific approach, and that's what I've seen being successful, where we have, and also from an organizational structure, how do we manage projects with business stakeholders? So we have also seen organizational structures that have either a centralized data science management, or data scientists that are sitting within verticals within a marketing the marketing department or the sales department, and then you still have a more centralized engineering environment or data science environment that work together in order to overcome this problem, right? But it's still a big problem in general, right? Another one is that we don't usually have, and that's because it's a very innovative problem and an innovative technology way of looking at it, that organizational change and management and change management is not taught and a general skill in the data science world, right? There's a lot of consulting experience that is actually helping to help business stakeholders understand problems, and there's a big unknown, and that the business doesn't know how to ask for a problem. And I give an example. For example, I've seen that a couple times, that a business stakeholder comes and says, hey, I would like to have a recommendation what to do. And this is triggering on the data science side. A lot of times the idea, okay, the business stakeholder wants from me the recommendation engine. So, but the problem with that is that there's a misunderstanding in the wording. So the business stakeholder actually meant a recommendation what to do, but it doesn't mean a recommendation engine. It means something totally different. And to help business stakeholders understand and getting them on the journey, there needs to be and I like to, and usually in data science and in education, we learn that, but we easily put that aside because it doesn't sound interesting. It's exploratory, descriptive analytics, and predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics, and this all sounds very theoretical and has nothing to do with algorithms, but those are actually the pieces that help in organizational change and help actually business stakeholders to understand. And this is a fundamental requirement in order to create value. Because if we don't get the business stakeholders on board, we can't create value. And the last piece is to have an experienced data scientists that have been through that journey, that learn from a lot of mistakes. And when I work with my stakeholders, I usually talk about the mistakes I've made, and to help them not making those mistakes again. But if you look at this circle, you see that we actually usually only have 2 pieces out of the 6 pieces that I just talked about that we learn at university or we have as a background. The other pieces are hard to get, right? So that is and mostly when we even think about leadership, we have a one-sided leadership as well. So we have somebody coming from computer science, or we have somebody coming from management consulting or engineering, but they don't bring this full circle of skills and experience that is actually necessary in order to create value within an organization. So that's one piece. The second one is, as I said, business is central. And that's something Prashant mentioned, that a lot of companies focus on the wrong use cases. And I just made that example with the churn, the churn use case for insurance. But there's other pieces which I think are very interesting that those use cases are usually driven by a strong analytical orientation. I just gave that engine example. We learned about recommendation, or I heard about churn, or I heard about something in sales. The problem with that is that it's not business driven. Even if I have a use case, and I get this question all the time, can you give me ideas about use cases, or can you talk about what does our competition do? Looking from that perspective, it implies that this problem is a problem you're facing as well. But those problems are actually very specific to every organization. So even if I'm the leader in a specific market, that might indicate that I have a totally different problem than the second or the third, or somebody who's least in that, who's the last, has the lowest market share in that market. So they might have totally different problems. Same with some corporations already have solved the problem. And for example, when we talk about fraud in insurance, right? Some organizations have already good third-party providers that have solved the problem for them. So they don't need to solve that problem again, right? Or in pricing or whatever. So there might be already a lot of things that are already solved we don't need to work on, right? Then there's a next problem is that I gave with this churn example, that we mostly think through that full use case. We think about a very theoretical potential, which might not indicate that there's actually business value to create, right? As I said, there's the not consideration of change management. If I have a problem I want to solve that requires that 1,000 people need to change how they work on a day-to-day basis, this might not be the best use case to go for, right? Then we have data-driven limitations, right? Usually I say, okay, data should not indicate your use case, but because that could be a problem when somebody comes and says, okay, I have this data, what can let's do AI, right? But for me, data is not important. Data can be bought, collected, found, created, generated so many ways that data should not drive your roadmap, right? Then you have areas where senior management has a specific requests or see specific areas they want to go after, which might not be from this data science perspective the best, the low-hanging fruit in that area, right? And the last one is that, and I have seen that too, that technological or skill set limitations actually define the roadmap. We don't have people for that, so we can't do that. But those might be the biggest problems to solve in an organization. So that might be worth $500 million, but we don't have people for it. So that we go after something that might create $1 million. So it is then, so all those things are actually driving analytics, which are not really business centric, right? So I think that AI success depends on getting the execution right. And I don't mean like executing from a technology perspective. It means like developing a strategy, going after verticals, defining a strategy that is in alignment with an organizational needs, and find, I would say, the right needs and pain points within an organization that can actually help and create opportunities, right? And then everything that comes with it, building a data foundation and creating a way that the organizational culture allows experiments. That's another important piece. And that's something Prashant also mentioned before. Not picking one use case, pick a couple that you want to follow up on to see, okay, which ones actually works with which one doesn't. Because it's hard to think through every single one, right? And that's the last piece here, is that, as I said, every business has its own characteristics and needs, that the implementation of AI needs to be tailor-made. They are based on specific pain points of an organization. And this is, for example, a process from business problem definition through finding causes and actions, defining based on causes and actions. And if there's something you can do about it, you can fix that problem from a business perspective, then you can create an analytical approach in order to know, okay, what do you need to know in order to take those actions? And then you can say, okay, that's the data we need. That's the solution we need to develop. And the last problem, or the last point, is talking about cultural challenges. As I said, there is one big piece, and that's that how do you transform an organization that is not data centric, right? 2019, new venture partners actually surveyed and found that 31% of companies say they are data driven, and it was decreasing since 2017. So less organizations actually say they are data driven. So at the end, executive cited multiple factors, organizational alignment, and so on, saying that most of it is from cultural challenges and only 5% are relating to technology. So technology is not the problem anymore. We solved that, and I think we've seen that, right? Another one, a Deloitte study says the same. It's the it's the cultural effects that are driving it, and it's knowledge and the from leadership and motivation to really apply AI. But that's a hard one, right? The example is actually what I gave from the propensity to churn model. If you build a great engine, right, not just that it doesn't necessarily need to work, but it also, you need to be able that to convince the people that they actually use it, right? How do you convince somebody that is afraid of the technology to use it, right? What we see is that among those successful leaders, 87% spend half of their analytics budget on that last mile, on that transformation piece, on getting people and business people on board. And that's very, very crucial in order to drive it. I think thinking about return on investment on AI is still a work in progress that requires focus on strategic change. And when we think about the future, this is just right now. So the future is going more and more that direction, right? When we start, and we have on the x-axis, this is a Deloitte study, on the x-axis, the objectives of organizations. And then we see here where we have seen that AI has achieved an outcome and a benefit. We can see that we have moving away from processes that are kind of the low-hanging fruits, somewhere where nobody's involved, there's no change management, no transformation is relevant or important. When you go down and say, okay, you need to enhance existing products, you need to enhance relationships with customers, you need to create new products and services, or even enable new business model. This requires change management, transformation, and this goes all in the direction of decision support and augmentation, decision augmentation. And those are becoming more and more important when we pick those low-hanging fruits. That's why I really like a study from Gartner that says, okay, 2030, we have 5.5 trillion possible business value created by AI, and 44%, which is a high share, comes from decision support and augmentation. And decision support and augmentation requires workforce transformation. And this is a essential part that we need to get there over the next years. The next one is that all of them, in order to first decision support and augmentation, but also developing products and decision automation, you need to be able to trust the AI. So responsible AI is going to become more and more important. That's something Travis also talked about. So putting that together, I think the future challenges are on especially work and organizational challenges, as well as on the responsible AI side. So when we talk about future work challenges, I think that the educational systems, as well as the workplace, need to catch up and focus on STEM, and as well as skills and creativity, critical thinking, and promote a lifelong learning. It's not that we can learn that and we are done. The next one is we need to invest in human capital, right, in the private as well as the public sector. And then we need to think about the jobs that are actually getting lost. So there's a lot of people that are scared of AI. That the vision of AI can be twofold. There could be two sides of the coin. The one is where we actually create value by getting more money, and the other one is where we're cutting costs and we're losing people by cutting costs because we automate things, right? So we need to rethink the transition and give those people and workers a safety net, right? We need to draw from best practices around the world and help to really consider those approaches, right? On the responsible AI side, we need to strengthen consumer data and privacy and security in order to really gain trust in AI, right? We need to generate a framework that shares the principles and help like help to show how AI can be of safe use and can be beneficial in our society. We need to go and think about best practice in order to think think through across the organizations. Right now, every organization does something different. Every industry does it different. But that also creates like I would say that scares people, right? And the last one, we need to be able to provide the benefits of AI. You need to It needs to be widely available, and that's what H2O is actually trying to do. It tries to democratize AI and provide this an environment for different stakeholders within organizations. Okay, thank you so much. Any questions?